We start with an online summit U.S. President Joe Biden is hosting to discuss how to tackle climate change. He called for joint international efforts and announced a new emissions target for his country.
The United States sets out on the road to cut greenhouse gases in half by the end of this decade.
U.S. officials say the country aims to cut emissions by 50 to 52% by 2030 compared with 2005 levels. That's much more ambitious than the previous reduction target of 26 to 28% by 2025. Representatives from 40 countries and organizations are taking part in the two-day event. They include Japanese Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide, Chinese President Xi Jinping, and Russian President Vladimir Putin. The participants are outlining how their countries will tackle climate change. Now, the summit is a chance for Biden to demonstrate U.S. leadership on climate change. Hours after taking office in January, he signed a document to have the U.S. rejoin the 2015 Paris Agreement. His predecessor, Donald Trump, pulled out of the agreement last year. He said it put American manufacturers at a disadvantage. Biden is also expected to seek more cooperation from China, which is the world's biggest emitter. This comes amid growing tensions over security and human rights. Prime Minister Suga announced a new target for Japan's emissions. He said the goal is a cut of 46% by 2030 compared with levels in fiscal 2013. He said Japan will work closely with the United States to advance clean energy technologies and help developing countries shift toward being carbon neutral. The Paris Agreement looks to limit the rise in the average global temperature to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The United Nations says achieving that goal means cutting worldwide emissions 45% by 2030. Moving now to the coronavirus situation here in Japan, the government is preparing to declare a third state of emergency for 4 prefectures after their governors made the request. The measure will take effect on Sunday and last until May 11th. That means it'll be in place for a week-long holiday that starts next week. Osaka Prefecture had the largest number of daily infections in the country on Thursday, with over 1,100 new cases. The tally has now exceeded 1,000 for 3 days in a row. Authorities in Kobe, in neighboring Hyogo Prefecture, report a woman infected with the virus died at home while waiting to be hospitalized. They say local medical institutions are not able to respond to the recent spike in infections. The governors of Osaka and neighboring prefectures agreed to call on bars and restaurants to totally stop serving alcohol and for events to be canceled or postponed. People who've been looking forward to the economic boost of the long holiday have mixed feelings. This amusement park is facing the possibility of having to shut during the state of emergency.
The coming holiday is usually the busiest period for the amusement park. A closure request would make a huge dent in our business. I am worried about what lies ahead of us.
The economic repercussions are already being felt in the ancient capital of Kyoto. These Maiko entertainers say an event they've been preparing for will most likely be canceled.
We've been practicing every day. I'm a little disappointed.
The pace of increase in infections is also rising here in Tokyo. Officials reported 861 new cases on Thursday, the highest daily count since the second state of emergency was lifted. Experts monitoring the situation in the metropolis say variants of the virus are becoming dominant. They say if the trend continues, the daily figure will exceed 2,000 in 2 weeks. The metropolitan government plans to ask bars and restaurants which serve alcohol or offer a karaoke to completely shut down. Other eateries will be asked to close by 8 p.m.
It's important to take stricter measures immediately. There's no time to lose, keeping in mind the situation in the western part of the country.
The central government is expected to formalize the decision on Friday. Across Japan, about 5,500 new infections were confirmed on Thursday, marking the highest daily tally since the last state of emergency was lifted. The leaders of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations are scheduled to meet in the Indonesian capital on Saturday to discuss the situation in Myanmar, where the military's crackdown on protesters continues. A UN spokesperson says its special envoy for Myanmar will take part on the sidelines of the meeting. UN Special Envoy Christine Schraner-Burgener appears to have left Bangkok for Jakarta on Thursday. The UN spokesperson said the envoy is seeking dialogue with all the parties involved and revealed she's been in contact with Myanmar's military by email and phone. A Thai Foreign Ministry spokesperson said the government will send Foreign Minister Don Pramudwinai to the meeting. He said Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha should stay in the country due to a surge in coronavirus cases.
The upcoming ASEAN leaders meeting is not only the first meeting of ASEAN leaders since the event on 1st of February 2021 in Myanmar, but also the first physical meeting of ASEAN leaders since the COVID-19 pandemic began around the world over a year ago.
Manila said Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte will not attend as well for similar reasons and will be represented by his foreign minister. The UN Special Envoy is expected to ask for pressure to be put on Myanmar's military to break the impasse in the country. The military has been escalating its crackdown on protesters, reportedly leaving 741 civilians dead. Australia says it's canceling 2 agreements between Victoria State and China connected to Beijing's Belt and Road investment scheme. Relations have soured since Australia called for an independent investigation into the origin of the coronavirus. Foreign Minister Marisa Payne released a statement on Wednesday terminating the agreements signed in 2018 and 2019. She called them inconsistent with Australia's foreign policy or adverse to the nation's foreign relations. The Australian federal government last year gained powers to review international deals struck by states and municipalities. China has denounced Australia's decision.
Australia has unilaterally destroyed normal cooperative ties between the two countries by cancelling the agreements. This has seriously damaged trust.
The spokesperson added China reserves the right to take further action. A British pharmaceutical firm is set to apply for the first ever regulatory approval for a set of abortion pills in Japan. A doctor says Lion Pharma's clinical trials in the country have confirmed their efficacy and safety. The World Health Organization recommends such oral medications for safe abortions. Similar drugs have already been approved in more than 70 countries. The clinical trials in Japan were carried out on 120 women within the first 9 weeks of pregnancy. The results showed for 112 of them, induced abortion was completed by medication alone as expected. 71 women complained of pain or vomiting, symptoms that were also reported in other countries. More than half of them were deemed to be the side effects of the medication. This obstetrician and gynecologist says she welcomes the results.
Oral abortion drugs, which are proving to be safe around the world, are moving toward approval in Japan. I think this is a big step in protecting women's health.
Lion Pharma is expected to apply for regulatory approval by the year end. In other news, Japan's leading academic body has once again demanded the Prime Minister immediately appoint all of the scholars it nominated for membership. It's the continuation of a months-long controversy that called into question Suga's commitment to academic independence. The Science Council of Japan met for an annual meeting on Thursday where they endorsed the latest call for Suga to appoint 6 rejected scholars. The statement says the Prime Minister has a legal obligation to do so. The Council makes recommendations on government policies. The 6 rejected scholars are known critics who've spoken out against legislation on topics such as national security and terrorism. The Council is independent, but members are special national government employees, a status Suga highlighted when he addressed the matter in October. He denied nominees were rejected for their past opinions and said it was about the proper running of a publicly funded organization. The council's current members are demanding a better explanation. And next, call it a breath of fresh air. NASA has taken another leap forward in efforts to explore Mars, producing oxygen from the red planet's thin air for the first time. The extraterrestrial breakthrough came through Perseverance, which is the name of the rover that successfully landed on Mars in February. The U.S. Space Agency says it took about 3 hours to convert carbon dioxide-rich atmosphere into 5.4 grams of oxygen. That's enough for an astronaut to breathe for 10 minutes. The process uses extreme heat to separate oxygen atoms from carbon dioxide molecules and could prove cheaper and easier than transporting tanks from Earth.
314,835 new COVID-19 cases in a single day, the most in the history of the coronavirus crisis. India's healthcare system is close to collapse as a result. In Vatican City, Pope Francis meets with Lebanon's next Prime Minister, Saad al-Hariri, and promises to visit the country after political forces settle their disputes. France's ambassador to Chad meets with the country's new leader, Mohamed Debi Itno. And the American Space Agency NASA says its vehicle Perseverance on Mars has used a device to create oxygen from the planet's thin atmosphere.
Hello, I'm Ros Atkins with the headlines from BBC World News. India has recorded the highest single-day total for new COVID-19 cases seen by any country so far in the pandemic. Deaths from coronavirus reached a new high on Thursday too, and hospitals are struggling to cope. The funeral is being held in Minneapolis of Dante Wright, a 20-year-old African-American man who was shot dead by police earlier this month. The officer said she meant to use an electric shock device on him, but mistakenly pulled her firearm instead. President Biden's promised to cut America's carbon emissions by at least half before the end of this decade. He called on other leaders at a virtual climate summit to take decisive action. And Russia's defense minister has ordered some of the Russian forces deployed near the border with Ukraine to withdraw to their bases. Ukraine has welcomed the move.